Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this is the office. That's where the doors lead out into the rest of the house. That's where I sit and do work. That's where my lovely wife sits and does work. There's some windows that head into the backyard. And this is me sitting at the desk, looking over the study guide, getting ready to do our third installment of what we're calling In Case You Missed It. And the hope here is to provide information starting with the Revolutionary War and then making our way up to probably around the Constitutional Convention. I don't think I'm going to make it all the way to 1790 in 10 minutes. We'll have to see. Wait and stay tuned. Okay, so where are we? To answer that all-time favorite holiday question, where does this go on the study guide? It goes right about down here, right where we're talking about the Revolutionary War. Do we have to write this down? Yes, you may want to write this down. Where are we again? We're down here on the bottom of the page. Okay. I don't know what student that's an impersonation of, but if it's you, shape up. All right, so when we left off, we were talking about how the Revolutionary War is really solved for us in the sense when we win at Saratoga in 1778 and are able to get the French to help us. That doesn't just give us military and financial support, it gives us legitimacy. That kind of a European power willing to support us and help us in the war effort means that other European countries might be willing to aid us or offer us loans or maybe even stay out of the war like the Spanish did and in essence be neutral and help us by staying out of the war and not helping the English in this one. On our study guides, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to flip the page, okay? And the next thing we're going to see is the Treaty of Paris. In the Treaty of Paris by 1783, the United States was able to gain all of Britain's American territories, not the Canadian ones. Those were left out. Yeah, out. Hey, that's a great house you have there. That's fantastic. We should get some Canadian bacon, yeah? Now, what the heck is this? For a moment there, the phone went wacky. I'm going to keep going, though. Okay? So, adding to it, Great Britain unfortunately lost the territory I was just talking about. They didn't lose the Canadian parts, though. Keep that in mind. The French were hoping they were going to get some North American territories. They did not. None for you. They were getting a little greedy about it, and so we went to the negotiating table without them, and that was that. The next portion of the study guide asks us to talk about how the Revolutionary War perhaps affected other people in America that we might not be thinking about when we're talking about the war. Women, for instance, the key phrase here, key phrase, put it in quotes, write it down, etch it into your skull. Republican motherhood. As a result of women's service to America during the war, women are rewarded with this new title of Republican motherhood. It's their job to instill in the future patriots of America the ideas, the privileges, the liberties that come with being in America. They need to tell their Jefferson stories and their Washington stories, and they need to make sure that we raise good young patriots. Now, weren't they doing that before Holliday? Yeah, they kind of were, so we really just changed the job title and didn't give you a raise. America. Okay? On top of that, ladies and gentlemen, the next question asks us about our economic problems. We've got major economic problems. We're going to come back to this one in a moment, but suffice to say that during the war we printed a lot of paper money and we took out a lot of loans, and those are lingering over our head. The United States has won the Revolutionary War, but that doesn't mean we're going to be a success. That doesn't guarantee us a long-term prosperity. What it does is give us the opportunity to succeed, but if we don't pay off those bills, somebody's gonna come looking for us. Okay. The next question asks about the Loyalists. You might expect us to kill them all. We didn't. Nice of us, I thought. Very genuine. We allowed most of the Loyalists to leave the country that wanted to leave. I say most because some Loyalists didn't want to leave. Many of them did, but some stayed. If they left, they sold their lands. Those were not confiscated by the revolutionary government. They were able to collect whatever debts were due them, and they left with only a little bit of physical harm. Some did get some stuff thrown at them, and a few got beat up, but no one got killed. So in the long run, you know, it's all fun and games until a Loyalist loses an eye. Moving down the list, in what ways did the Revolutionary War change the status of slaves in North and South? And now this is a very serious topic, and it's one where there's a hugely different answer North and South. In the North, the general trend is toward emancipation. Beginning with Massachusetts in 1784, most of the northern states, most of the states north of that Mason-Dixon line, got rid of slaves either immediately over a short period of time, or some of them over a longer emancipation period. Some of them took, say, a generation. Instead, if a slave reaches the age of 25 or 30 or 35, then that slave is free. The states were a little worried about taking slaves away from individuals and, in that sense, removing property without compensating them. So the general trend in the North, away from slavery. In the South, on the other hand, it's going to go much the opposite direction. Slavery becomes more and more entrenched in the South, especially with the invention of Eli Whitney's cotton gin. Slavery is going to become a bigger and bigger part of the Southern economy. By 1860, 60 cents out of every American dollar is in essence cotton money. It is all linked to that Southern economy. So in the South, it's a very different story. Let's flip the page. What do they do about religion? Now, Thomas Jefferson's the real Mac Daddy here. Jefferson writes a document in which he explains the importance of separating the church and the state. This is where we get that famous phrase about a wall of separation between church and state. Not a Roger Williams wall of separation where we're protecting the church from the state, but a Thomas Jefferson one where we are protecting the state from the church. A lot of the other states begin to adopt those kinds of ideas, and pretty quickly we're going to see a country where we move away from things like a state-sponsored church or taxes that go towards sponsoring or paying for a church within the state, oaths of religion for office holders or requirements of religion for office holders. Those things are going to go by the wayside. So even though we were a deeply, deeply religious society, and still a religious society in many aspects, Jefferson thought it was best that we move away from religion as it related to influencing politics. Moving down my list here. I'm asked about Judith Sargent Murray and Abigail Adams. We all read about Abigail Adams and how she was saucy. John Adams and Abigail had famous letters back and forth. And what do you really need to remember? Abigail says, don't you forget about us. Don't you lose sight of the fact that you should not use powers like a tyrant, in other words, like George III, over women. You should give us better opportunity. Judith Sargent Murray, who's a wealthy woman of the colonies, follows that up by saying, yes, good idea. And let's make sure we educate women, because that's really the only difference between the genders, that one of them gets good access to education and the other one does not. And because of that, we have problems that we have. Moving down the road here, we're asked about the Articles of Confederation government. Weak government, purposely weak, right? The states did not want to join into a strong central government. They had just left one. So things that it could do, it could make war, it could make peace, it could in essence lead the army and direct the army. It's a very appropriate government if you're looking for a disaster sort of government, a government that can lead in times of necessity. But in peacetime, it's not a very effective thing because it doesn't give the central government very much power. So on the other side, on its weaknesses, what we're going to say is that it had very little power to actually conduct policy. It could not force the states to do anything, really. And that led to huge problems because, importantly, during the war, it couldn't say, hey, send us money and send us soldiers. It could ask for those things, but it couldn't say you have to send them. And that meant that a lot of the time you had to borrow and print money, and that's where we lend our way down that road. Now, that's what the states wanted, though. They wanted a purposely weak government, so don't think that that's something that just sort of happened to them. They did not want a tightly bound government like they had had in a relationship with George III. So that's the sort of relationship that they wanted. We should always remember that. The Northwest Ordinances are a really cool plan that Jefferson hatches out where we're going to settle the territories west of the Appalachians, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, and Wisconsin, and we're going to do it by moving people there in an orderly fashion. We're going to sell that land. You can't have slaves there. You have to have Republican forms of government there. And importantly, it opens up that Northwest area to people who need to settle out of New England especially. Those are people who have been looking for somewhere to settle for a long time. Last things we're going to talk about here, Native Americans. There are plenty of Native Americans in those territories I just talked about. Generally speaking, Americans are going to believe that they have a right to that land and not Native Americans, and so they're going to storm into those territories. There's going to be a number of wars against Native Americans leading to the Treaty of Greenville in 1795, which states basically that Native Americans might live on the land, but that we, in a sense, own it. We're their political fathers. And the last point I'm going to talk about is Shay's Rebellion. If you're looking for more details about Daniel Shays, I made a video about him earlier. But for our purposes right here, Daniel Shays was a Massachusetts soldier who came home from the Revolutionary War with huge debts and didn't get the help that he wanted from Massachusetts. He led a rebellion in Massachusetts against courthouses and against justices and judges. And Shay's Rebellion shows us that we need a stronger government. We need economic reform, and we need a central government that can watch out for these sorts of rebels. In our next installment, we're going to do the Constitutional Convention. We're going to talk about Washington's administration and also Adams. Take care and have a good night, folks. It's been good.